Hello, I'm Stephan Wolfert.
Hi, TDF fans. I'm Dawn Stern.
And we are from DE-CRUIT, a theater program based in New York City that uses Shakespeare to help heal trauma.
You're the founder.
Oh, yeah, and visual as well.
Oh,
I'm the founder. Yes. I am a 55-year-old white man with crazy gray hair and a gray and red beard. Both are very extremely unkempt for the show right now.
And I'm not going to say my age, except to say it's in the middle sector of things. I am a Black woman, caramel skinned, with curly hair pulled back on top of my head, with the curls sprouting on top of my head, with glasses.
First question.
There
we go.
Okay, I get to ask you this.
Okay.
Many classic plays explore the impact of war on soldiers. So why did you decide to focus solely on Shakespeare?
This could be a dissertation. I assume we're getting into other areas, so I'll try to be as succinct in Polonius's words as I can. Yeah. Here's why. First of all, it had a direct impact on me. I was in the Army, and I'll talk more about that later, but I was in the Army and saw a Shakespeare play, and it so deeply affected me that it caused me to transition out of the military and go become a classical actor, specifically on Shakespeare at Trinity Rep Conservatory. But in working now for 25 plus years on Shakespeare and in theater as medicine, as Yvette Nolan phrases it, Shakespeare wrote, first of all, historically, Shakespeare wrote so perfectly about the veteran experience. He was surrounded by veterans. When he was writing his plays, England was in two wars, one conventional warfare with Spain, on again, off again, with both Cold War and conventional warfare, and in unconventional warfare in Ireland, 9 years war that was guerrilla warfare, among other things. And he was seeing veterans coming back and having the experiences that we have today. And the greatest speech in the English language about post-traumatic stress disorder was written by Shakespeare over 400 years ago. Lady Percy's speech in Henry IV, Part 1, where she's asking her husband questions about his behavior, which are right out of the diagnostic manual describing post-traumatic stress syndrome. Questions you've asked me in our marriage in the middle of the night when I'm having my night terrors or what have you. So he speaks so perfectly to the veteran experience. And that would be the number one big reason. There's so much more, but I'm willing to bet we're going to get into some of the other reasons why. But you did say, why Shakespeare? And I'm not dogging anything else. It's just personally, there is the fact that he also just speaks to me, right? I'm often asked, why not the Greeks, or why not this, or why not that? For me, the Greek plays never had the same impact, just speaking for myself. I don't know if it's because they're translated from Greek and I don't speak Greek or what, but Shakespeare wrote this heightened poetry in my first language. But even though it's I don't speak like that, but it's this heightened language in the natural rhythm of the human body, which I'll also get into a little bit later. Yes. So for me, it's what he wrote, how he wrote it, and what he's writing about speaks so personally to me. And as I would offer to other veterans, they would say the same thing. Hopefully that answers it. I ramble.
Next question.
I'll ask you.
Okay.
Together, you wrote and are starring in a trio of plays on Theatre Row this summer, all inspired by Shakespeare's language, characters, and themes. What can you share about them?
Lots. I can share lots about them. Yes, we have been working on these adaptations for years, but in the last 2 years, we've had a lot of time to work on them because theaters were shut down. And we really... one of the things that we do at DE-CRUIT, and the way we use Shakespeare as a tool, because we are well aware that it was used as a colonizing tool, but we decontextualize the text and specifically edit it for the experience of the community that we're working with, which has traditionally been veterans, but has expanded to trauma survivors. And so what I could share, the plots and everything else about the shows, but it's all online at TDF. It's all online at Theater Row. It's all online at DE-CRUIT. What I really think is important to share about The Head of Richard, Make Thick My Blood, and She-Wolf is that they're all adapted from Richard III, Macbeth, and She-Wolf is taken from Henry VI, parts 1, 2, and 3. They're short. The running time is all between 50 and 60 minutes. They're two-person because in COVID, we couldn't be with anyone but ourselves. We were our own married pod. And most importantly, they're really looking at Shakespeare through the lens of trauma survivors. I think that that's a special take. I don't see it everywhere, which is not to say there's not joy and laughter. That's how you get through. It's one of the survivor skill of trauma is to find humor to survive. So it's not to say that they're this laden dramatic, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you've survived trauma, we call it the trauma lens, right? You view the world very specifically, especially as it pertains to your safety, and the coping mechanisms that we use, which often masquerade as traits of our personality, make characters interesting to us. And Shakespeare's writing and his plays lend themselves so much to the human experience that what we wanted to do was pull out of. So we're not trying to tell the story of Macbeth with Make Thick My Blood. We are trying to tell the story of the Macbeths and the complex PTSD that they've suffered, both from combat and the loss of a child, and how that changes and influences their behavior and their choices. And so that's really our take on these three shows. The Head of Richard is up first. It opens this week. And it really looks at Richard III through the lens of attachment disorder. What happens to a person when their mother either isn't there or is there in such an abusive way? How does that influence who you become? And so I think that's kind of what's special and what moves people. And the last thing I'll say is that the shows were also designed for our community and the communities where DE-CRUIT goes. Our friends of Bill, we go to addiction centers, recovery centers, transition centers, prisons, libraries, any place of veteran service organizations, any place where veterans meet. And we use theater. We really believe in a theater as medicine model, and we use theater to start, and these shows specifically to facilitate conversations in communities so that we can speak what we feel and not what we ought to say, King Lear. And so that's what we really hope these shows really spark those conversations about what we're carrying around inside of us, especially these last 2 years.
And when you mention, if you don't mind, I want to reiterate what you said, that these adaptations, we're not, like you said, not attempting to do two-person versions of the entire plays. They're really from our own personal experiences of what we see and feel and hear and what impacts us from each of them. But She-Wolf, you mentioned The Head of Richard, attachment disorder, McBee, losing the child, and then military trauma on top of that. And both of these plays of which are very personal to us. And then She-Wolf.
Yes, I left out She-Wolf. I shouldn't have. She-Wolf is our adaptations of Henry VI, parts 1, 2, and 3. in 60 minutes. But we're not trying to tell the story of the War of the Roses. We're looking through Margaret of Anjou's eyes, the story of and the trauma of the other, of being otherized. She's a French queen. She's captured. She's bartered off to England. She's a French princess, bartered off to be England's queen, to an ineffectual king, and lands in what she calls a nest of scorpions. And so when I've been an actor and a writer for 30 years, but when I got to Margaret of Anjou in the canon, she was just always portrayed as a witch. She's called She-Wolf of France and many other names. And I just became really curious about who this woman is that shows up and curses everyone and leaves, and what's going on with her. And when I did the research and I found out the difference between Margaret of Anjou and Shakespeare's Margaret, that was really something for me. And also, when I'm speaking the language, was I for this nigh wrecked upon the sea? It just, so much of that made me think of really my experience, growing up in a homogeneously so-called white, I don't know what that means anymore, town. And I really just saw her as an outsider. And so when it came to telling her story, I really wanted to bring in some of the true things about her, not the things that were politically expedient to write. And I really am we're really looking at that as someone, as an outsider coming through that lens.
Yeah. It was drawn down very personally. Yeah, all three of them, and Dawn really focused on, it's yours to share, but just so much of in rehearsal and writing process, something that Margaret went through, Dawn would mention in rehearsal and writing, of the personal experience that she related to as an outsider. And I'm giving bunny ears, which is weird, but what I mean is, because it's such an awful term. I mean, not, you're being othered.
Right.
So yeah. Anyways, thank you for sharing that extra little bit. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I didn't mean to leave it out.
What is going on with this? I'm Harry Potter, apparently. Okay.
Can you give an overview of your process and how Shakespeare is able to, in your words, rewire veterans' brains?
Yes,
I know you can.
This is my jam.
I know.
All right. I have to see it again. Yes. So again, there's so much here, but I love they put it back up. Can you give an overview of your overview? Keyword for ADHD brain, of your process and how Shakespeare is able to, in your own words, rewire veterans' brains. Yes. Okay. So the military, let me be clear that and I'm a veteran. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. I was so nervous at the beginning. The military veteran, that Harvard and the Department of Defense have actually found that we veterans have much higher ACE scores than the average population, than the non-veteran population. What that stands for is adverse childhood experiences. We always think of extreme childhood abuse, but it doesn't have to be. It's neglect. It's a mother who has severe postpartum depression and is unable to be present for the child, all the way up to severe abuse and everything in between. A parent who's addicted or depressed or suffering, handing down their stuff, unfortunately. So we have much higher incidence of that, if you will. And then the military, and by the way, that's where a lot of the modern research is showing in trauma, that's where so many of the constellation of symptoms that we often describe, PTSD, ADHD, all the diagnoses, many of them begin there or are fully formed there. And the military somehow attracts all of us. I think it somewhat by design, attracts us and then rewires us. And they use breath, rhythm, community, and language to rewire us for war, to get us to be able to respond to orders without thought, and then frankly, and this is our mission, everyone does it, to respond to a threat with violence. That every single person who joins the military, regardless of what your job is, has to learn how to fire a rifle at another human being and take their life. We are not wired that way. We know for a fact that, generally speaking, the vast majority of us avoid that. So the military takes this, I would say, vulnerable population and wires us to do that. Through the use of rhythm, breath, community, and language. So what I found with Shakespeare was that the theater community, the rhythm of Shakespeare's language, the breath that's required in it, and the language itself was rewiring me post-military service. That's where we get our program's name, DE-CRUIT. We are recruited and given all the resources we need to enter the military, but we're never decruited and given the resources to leave the military. My generation was even, I don't want to say worse, but in my generation, there was none of that. There was just, you left the military. Now they're at least attempting some modicum of programming for veterans, but it's inadequate. Basic training is 8 weeks to get in and 0 to get out, sometimes a few hours or a few days. I'm off on a tangent, but I think that's important to understand that where we came from and what we're part of our mission of what we're doing with this. So then Shakespeare himself, he's inflicted on us in high school, and we're given the term of iambic pentameter. And what is it? And describe it. Well, by the time you hit to iambic, I'm already starting to grayscale over my eyes because I don't care. But think of this. My generation, we learned CPR to do 5 chest compressions to 1 breath. That's iambic pentameter. 5 heartbeats for a single breath. And Shakespeare wrote in this rhythm of our human body. And I'll demonstrate first. For example, Hamlet's famous speech, To Be or Not to Be. He gives us 5 heartbeats for 1 breath and 1 line of verse, because he wrote it like song lyrics in this verse, this blank verse. So when Hamlet comes out and looks directly at the audience, and we know he could see the audience because he wrote, the plays were performed in the middle of the day outside because there was no roof. So they could see the audience and they would ask them, to be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them to die, to sleep no more, and by asleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep. So he's giving us this rhythm for the actor to bring up deep personal truths. He's given us a pattern on which we know through science that by breathing in that rhythm, we actually reset the brain, if you will. We're actually, even though we're saying something in public, which, by the way, social psychology shows us that speaking in public worldwide is more terrifying than death. So speaking in public, breathing in, which interrupts our fight or flight, freeze, fawn, or other response, our limbic system response to some degree. It can activate it, but then we're given language to speak to that experience. As Dawn said, to speak what we feel and not what we ought to say, this heightened language. And then we breathe in and move to the next one. It prevents us from wallowing in that one single, I don't want to say wallowing, it prevents us from staying stuck in that one singular experience and forces us to breathe and go to the next experience. And it begins to teach our body that I can have feelings, I can have vibrations, I can deeply express myself and have a fully embodied experience that is in fact linked to some of my former trauma, but recover from it and go on to the next moment, And all of that, not only while doing that, but staying present. And the last bit, I know I'm going on a lot, but this is why this works. And this is why we've had scientific papers published on the work. This is why we have chapters written in books about it, and why the program persists, because there's also a mechanism of it that, and this is where theater comes in, that's similar to recovering from healing, is that I'm in the moment. that Dawn and I say in one of our 3 plays, where we're speaking and I'm re-experiencing, because these plays speak to our personal trauma, where one of us can be having the moment, our body responding to that moment, but then I'm able to activate that part of me that's also aware that I don't have to be myopic, that I am in a play, that there are lights, that is an audience. And while that might be more exacerbating for some, those mechanisms are partly what we need to recover from trauma, that those are what we need to be able to step back from it and realize, oh, I'm getting so caught up in it. And that's what trauma does. It keeps us stuck in this singular loop instead of giving us a chance to look at ourselves from afar, aesthetic distance. Yeah. So that's a lot. And I could go on, obviously, but that's why Shakespeare. Yeah. What did I miss?
And no, you didn't miss anything. I was going to say, I was going to add that, DE-CRUIT, what we normally do is we're invited into a community either through a theater or a university, sometimes centers or VSOs, and we do workshops with veterans where they get to do some classical actor training and an integration. DE-CRUIT is really an integrated model, an interdisciplinary between classical actor training, cognitive processing, EMDR, everything that we've learned that helps. We're theater practitioners. We're not doctors, so there's no pathologizing. None of that's needed. We all get in a room. We get in a circle. We speak this language and use some personal narrating, personal writing. From writing prompts, and that is how each participant's monologue is chosen from their own writing prompts, and then the program ends in a final presentation that is in front of the community. So the communities that we're in get to actually hear from the veterans that are in their community, and that's the transformation, the transformative power of theater right there, because they're telling their stories and they're telling it to their friends and family. And so now you have a civilian community who can let go of the war movies that they've seen and actually take in what the veterans in their community are saying were their experiences. So there's just a real beautiful exchange that happens.
And that's on the DE-CRUIT program, which we'll even talk about more. But I wanted to finish my point as to what I was saying, that to finish up this. So the wiring, because I didn't finish. So with all of that, the way it rewires is, obviously I gave the rhythm and breath, but what we're doing is we're interrupting old patterns. So normally when something would activate me, like the subway, that grounding, breathing in, helps to interrupt what I would normally have as a response. And I'm able to step outside just for a moment to see that, I'm being activated. Let me ground, breathe, open my eyes, see where I am in this place, not back in my traumatic experience or back in whatever environment I was in that created this response. And then to be able to give voice to it, which normally those language centers will go offline when we're in a traumatic moment. But by using Shakespeare, we're bringing those back on, specifically Broca's area of language making, to be able to say, I have tightness in my chest, a tightness in my throat, my jaw feels like it's going to make a diamond. To be able to do that, that's what Shakespeare does, is gives us that opportunity, a template by which we can begin our own recovery process and rewiring. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Next question, please. Dawn, you left a My name's Stephan. Hi. I have a question for you. You left a 6-figure salary.
Yes, I did.
You did. You left a 6-figure salary to work for DE-CRUIT. What was that transition like?
Scary. Most definitely scary. Look, I think a lot of people have found this out in the last couple of years, but this just so happened. This was in 2018. 2018, March of 2018. Stephan, this is his life's work. He's been doing this for over 20 years, and I assist when and where I can. We were both artists when we met. I had my own career, and when I needed stability, when I moved to New York City, I couldn't just rely on income from being an artist. It's too unstable, and your rent is very stable. So I picked up work after 20 some odd years of only working in the industry. My resume was on IMDb, and I had no real work resume, although if they knew how hard it was to get any kind of acting gig in LA or New York, they would just hire you automatically knowing that you could work. But that's another story. So I was working in the restaurant industry. I was GMing a restaurant in Soho, New York, and I did 10 years of that, 6 or 7 in Los Angeles, and then five more in New York and Shelter Island. And there's a lot in restaurants that's a lot like theater in many ways. And so I could use some of those skills, and the paycheck was steady, and all of that was fine. But what wasn't fine for me was the well, there's really just no other way to say it, is there? It was just challenging environment for many, many reasons. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be so challenged, why not learn something entirely new? Learn the nonprofit model and world, and help my husband, and really assist my husband, and put my time and my energy into something that I cared about, and something that mattered to me. And so I left. That's what happened. And so the transition was abrupt, and it was scary because there were just no more paychecks. We don't draw salaries from DE-CRUIT, so there were no more paychecks, and I wasn't sure how that was going to work. It turns out we needed to get rid of our overhead, and we moved into a van. We remodeled this van and started down where we're not exactly down by the river, but yeah, you had to. So we are van lifers, and that really helped. Getting rid of Brooklyn rent really helped. So yeah, we like to say,
which, by
we're
the way,
traveling thespians.
The inside of the van, I just wanted to say, Brian Judd. This is theater community. Brian Judd. I met him when I was working on Moving Out in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Billy Joe, Twyla Tharp.
Yep. And he was one of the tech crew, dear friends with him, and Emmett Kaiser and Allison Harma, the stage manager. He was building road boxes for the road tours, made that a business. When he found out that we were doing van life, he was like, get it down here to Las Vegas, Casecraft, and outfitted the inside of this. So on the outside it says crappy old van, and the inside it says gorgeous, all woods, beautiful interior. So I didn't mean part. No,
that was really that. I mean, so that when you say transition, I mean that was really it really changed my life. It changed how I was living. We had to downsize. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, and we went into a 90 square foot. I don't even know what that van. Yeah. So that's what but look, sometimes you just have to put your money where your mouth is. If it was hurting me. It wasn't fun where I was. And I like to care about what where I'm putting my energy and time. It's worth something. And so I didn't envision my life this way necessarily. Right now you're looking at an Airbnb because we're in Midtown doing these shows. But but it's been exciting. I've been able to spend quality time with friends and family and myself, which I didn't have before. And frankly, I've seen more of New York because when I was working at a restaurant, I was there 60 to 80 hours a week. I didn't, and when I was off, which was never off because you have a computer now, I didn't want to go out and see any shows. I didn't even know TDF veteran program. I didn't even know that it even existed. I never saw any shows. I was too busy working. So I have gotten a chance to really see the city and see the country and see different communities living this way. And I don't think that I would go back right now. I really enjoy it. So rough transition, life-changing in many ways, but worth it. Oh, well, now it's your turn, mister. You resigned from the military after seeing a production of Richard III in Montana, as I recall. What do you remember about that life-changing experience?
What do I remember? Well, I was in the deep throes of addiction at the time, so there's incredible patchy places, foggy places, I should say. At the time, what I remember was I was in the military. I was for the second or third time about to be career. I received a regular Army commission and embarrassingly, and carried shame for a long time, turned it down initially, then was offered it again later. I think it was one of the schools. I think IOBC said, "Hey, what about going full-time once again?" So I said, "Yes, let's do it. I'm going to make this my career, I think." And then I had two soldiers within a year take their own lives based on experiences we'd been through. And then a dear friend get killed in a live fire exercise right in front of me. And this is training. This is in the United States. So I didn't know at the time, but now I can look back on it and say I lost it. Luckily, I had my NCOs, the NCOs that I worked with were Vietnam veterans, so they knew what was going on with me. I fled. I technically went AWOL, but they were covering for me. And yeah, I ended up in a theater. Now, I didn't come from a theater family at all. The absolute opposite. Blue collar, labor force, former farmers, Wisconsin, like that. That's where I came from. And this is, the 80s, early 80s, where it's like, ragged and that macho hyper masculinity model. So theater was not on my radar, but I don't know why. I still to this day don't know why, but I ended up in a play of production of Richard III. And what I remember is an actor coming out dressed in military uniform, looking directly at me and expressing exactly how I was feeling in that moment. That I remember distinctly. I remember Richard III. I didn't know who the hell he was at the time. He came out and just started saying, we were at war. I was really good at it, and now we're not. And I don't know where I fit in. I don't know what do I do? And I at that moment, I realized that something had broken, that I was probably leaving, didn't know how to deal with that or process it. And who am I? What do I do? Right? Complete loss. And what I now know is the term catharsis. I had a catharsis. I was heaving, sobbing. I thought I was going to vomit. It was absolute physiological and mental breakdown in the play. That's what I remember. And the bizarre thing is I loved it. I loved what was happening because it was just a different me. It was something new. Now it took me 2 or 3 years to leave the Army to get out and to actually go to grad school and apply and find someone, Trinity Rep, thank you very much, who would take someone who had zero acting. And this is grad school. So that's what I remember from it. And it stayed with me. And what I also remembered was to keep with each new, in particular Shakespeare, because that's my chosen field, the area I'm most passionate about and wanted to stay in. After all, there are 38 plays minimum, and I've spent a lifetime on them, and there's several I haven't even hit yet. But I also remember that hearing it in a way that wasn't trained, in a way that hadn't been indoctrinated into theater training and the way we're supposed to hear things. And I remember hearing, both being a veteran and being a newbie to theater, hearing it differently than other actors, and especially in grad school, hearing when, the Henry V speeches or Richard III speeches, hearing it firsthand and personally, versus the way my classmates who are not veterans thought they should be done, right? And this hero myth and all of this other stuff, and war and the gloriousness of it instead of the somberness of it, instead of the dehumanizing of it, instead of the hollowing out of our humanity that is really going on. Shakespeare gives language to it. I don't always see it in actors who've not experienced that. So that's what I remember from that experience. So, is that a lot? Was that good?
No,
Okay.
it's great.
Great. I'll ask you,
Yeah.
TDF's Veterans Theater Going Program, of which we've attended. Thank you very much for this.
Yes.
We've benefited from this on both sides of it, veterans coming to our program, as well as us getting to go see plays. So TDF's Veterans Theater Going Program has taken participants to DE-CRUIT presentations in the past.
Sure.
What are your most memorable audience reactions?
Oh my goodness. First of all, I definitely, I'm so glad for a TDF Theater Going, Veterans Theater Going program, because,
Accessibility.
yeah. I mean, really probably needs to work on this. And thank gosh, there's a program that can help us see the shows, because we want to see them. I want to see all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you just, it just lightens the load a little bit. I can't afford $346 per ticket.
Times two,
to see these shows. And also, people are like, oh, there's other ways. Well, it's, you stand in line, and, it's so much work, and you guys make it really easy. So thank you, TDF. I've really enjoyed a lot of shows that
and what
way.
about the ones that come to us?
And the reactions, some of my favorite reactions. So really, I think people might know Stephan most from, as of late, from Cry Havoc, from his show Cry Havoc. And they've just been extraordinary. So many, I hardly know how to answer the question, but I can name a few that stand out. And one was, there was a woman who, so we have these, after our show too, we do talkbacks in the traditional town hall style, not the style of examining the play, but really a conversation where you're processing what happened, if anything, or what do you have to share, or how are you feeling? You're processing it right there in the theater, rather than walking out and talking about it in your car, or being left with it. So in one of the talkbacks for Cry Havoc, there was a woman who stood up and said, I was a Vietnam protester, and my brother was a Vietnam veteran, and I never understood why he did what he did, and why he chose that he chose to go. And I never understood, when he got back, why he couldn't let it go, until I saw your show. And I wish I had seen it earlier, because he committed suicide a couple of years ago. And she was crying. And there's veterans, a father and a son who both served in different wars, saying, I had a conversation with my son, with my dad, for the first time, about our service. We never did that before. A civilian who said, was crying. And I asked her if she was, all right. And I thought she was going to say she had a veteran, that happens a lot. She had a veteran family member, but what she said was, I'm ashamed. I feel shame. I live in New York City. I know that I see veterans. I probably pass them every day. I just never thought I just never thought about them. I never thought about anything they went through. And this changes all that. So to me, and also on the other side, we had a woman who stood up and said, I don't care about your veteran experience. My family was slaughtered in a genocide, and all I got for answers were, we were just following orders. So I don't feel sorry for you. I don't, this is the conversation. These are the conversations that happen at our shows. And I think they're worth having. I think they need to happen. And it's one of the reasons we leave space for that in what we do. So wild and varied reactions the show, during the show.
Yeah.
We love those reactions. We've stopped shows before to address things that were happening and reactions that were happening, because if you can't cry or have a cathartic experience in a theater, where can you do that? If you can't laugh out loud in a theater, where is that? We welcome, all reactions. We keep our talk backs about what happened in the room and about the people in the room. Our model is no pity, no apology, and no political agenda. It's about the humans in the room and what we feel and what we're experiencing.
I'm just going to chime in two things that I love that what you said, that very often we get veterans who say, that I thought I was alone.
Yes.
Very often we get veterans say, thank you for sharing my story or part of my story. I didn't know it was okay to talk about it. So those are two of our favorites. And the one thing I wanted to, my favorites, I should say, and what I wanted that you mentioned that I love so much is I want to acknowledge that the talk back, if you will, I don't necessarily love the term, but what we do as a post-show discussion, even that term, we've modeled after. I want to give credit to Randy Reinholds at Native Voices and Yvette Nolan, a Bear Clan of the Algonquin Nation in Canada, theater artist who taught us.
And the director of She-Wolf, by the way.
And director of She-Wolf, yes. Who taught, whom we modeled and crafted our post-show discussion after. And they're the ones who really opened our eyes to, right, why would you let everyone just go have an experience and go home and process it alone, especially if it's deeply traumatic. And if any population has experienced 600 years of trauma, one of them was certainly the indigenous population. And so if they can use theater as medicine, again, her term, why can't we borrow some of that for fellow veterans? So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you. Next question, please.
Well, what do you hope audiences take away from your productions, both veterans and civilians? I think we were talking about it a little bit in that last.
Yeah, that certainly it's okay to talk about it. That you're not alone. That shame and the trauma is exacerbated by being silenced, having your voice taken away, and being wronged.
Not being in community.
Rather than in community and expressing it and finding support for it. I hope that a shift happens. I know that sounds very minor, but in psychology and psychiatry, a shift is significant, because earlier when I was talking about being stuck, when we're stuck in something, sometimes we don't even know we're stuck. And sometimes hearing someone else's story, or sometimes experiencing or even feeling the vibrations of another human being going through something in our own body unleashes some of our own and can cause a shift. So any kind of shift is certainly something that I hope they take away. Well, what else?
You said that, and I remember, do you remember, I think we were in Palmdale along Lancaster in California, and there was a nurse who stood up after one of the shows, and she said, well, I don't really, consider myself a veteran, and Stephan stopped her and said, well, what did you do? And she said, I
asked if she went through basic training.
Yeah, she went through basic training. She said, yes, I enlisted. I went through basic training, and my job was putting the toe tags on the bodies so that families could identify their loved ones.
The body's coming home from Vietnam.
Vietnam. She was a Vietnam veteran. But she didn't consider herself a veteran because she didn't go over there.
Yeah.
And so what I said, I share that to say, yeah, it's just these human. What do we hope people take away? I hope that
that they're enough.
They're enough, and that your humanness, that it's yours, it's unique, it's special, it's enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I also hope, last thing I'd say on it, I also hope on just an artistic front of it, rather than all the trauma stuff, is that I hope it's our hope that the people who attend find Shakespeare accessible, perhaps in a new way, by making a 45-minute, 2-person personalized version of it with just Shakespeare's text. That people go, oh, I didn't know what the heck all that meant before. Now, I understood that.
Yeah.
Or I understood
not a
some
bad
of it.
takeaway either.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what we hope. Next question, please.
Are there any practices you developed at DE-CRUIT that you think could benefit the theater community at large?
Oh, yes. We both have lots to say on this.
Yeah, and we've been doing some of this work at universities. Syracuse University had us, Norwich University. And so we got to work with theater students at different universities and different theater companies, Cincinnati Shakespeare, and Prague Shakespeare. The practices really revolve around creating a shame-free environment, which is not what we came up with.
Mm-hmm.
We came up with, when we were coming up into the business, it was wholly patriarchal. The director was God. You did what he, because it was usually a he, said. You didn't ask questions. If you did, you were told you were replaceable, and on and on and on and on and on of that model. And that, as we see and feel,
and you got to get in product oriented. You got to get to here.
You got to get it right.
By this date.
You got to get this many butts in the seat. You got to earn this much money, or you're not valuable, and we'll find somebody who
process
has
doesn't matter. Product,
right?
Yeah,
it's not right. So I think to counter that, what's happening now are people who are very interested in the process. The means matter to a whole lot of people, and especially the younger generations coming up underneath us. They matter a lot, which is why you have We See You White American Theater. You have all of these, but the basis of all of them, for me, and what I think we share so much in the rooms, that is holding space, is creating an agreement that we are working from a shame-free space, which means you're not going to be shamed for making a choice. There's in play, which is robbed from us in trauma. One of the things so robbed from us when we suffer trauma, Stephan, you always say, and many people always say, it is called a play. And we should be able to play and create without fearing some kind of punishment or shaming if we don't do it some way that some person envisioned. It's part of the creative process. So I really think some of the shame-free practices are most what I see needed in the rooms.
What we're part of DE-CRUIT's origins were, how do we create what we consider an ideal rehearsal room?
Right.
And much of the DE-CRUIT, when I'm working with fellow veterans in the space, we are not trying to make actors. We're not even trying to put up a play. In the early days, we did full productions of Shakespeare out in LA, in particular with Keith Jeffries at USFA, United States Veterans Artists Alliance. We were putting veterans and civilians on stage together. In theory, the civilians were going to mentor the veterans, which they did, but very often the trained actors were coming back going, how did he just do that? Or how did he just had the audience? And it was this authenticity. And it began to reframe the way we teach acting, the way we rehearse plays. And what we did was like Dawn mentioned, we had so many toxic, so many awful, for us, awful rehearsal rooms, that how do we make one that we would want to be in? And how do we hold that space, as you put so perfectly? How do we just hold space to embrace process? And wherever we get, rather than it being like scene one, we got to get, let's work. Maybe we do need maybe something happened in the news or in your personal life that it's a lie to say, well, leave your baggage at the door. You can't. Clearly, you're not. Look at me. I can't. I bring me into the room. And how might that enrich our experience? But how do we work with that, with where people are at from that place, and work more from a group therapy model than a rehearsal model, if you will. And from there, then the process begins. And by, it's one thing to say shame-free, but how do we do it?
Right.
And it's the way we don't critique, we reward, because habits, I talked about earlier about wiring for war and then unwiring. Well, wiring happens by repetition and reinforcement, right? Doing something over and over again and being rewarded for it, or some sort of reward concept. As a addict in recovery, I understand that system well. Well, how do we make a positive rehearsal process, or a room that people want to come back to? And that's it. It's the foundation is we're going to reward the fact that you wanted to even show up, that you were able to overcome all the things that are going on in your life and make it here. That's huge. So we're going to reward you. And if you're late by this time construct, that can be shaming. We see it come in. Oh, sorry, make it. No. Welcome. Hi. You made it. You somehow overcame that bone-crushing depression that would keep you in bed and made it here. We're so happy you're here.
Yeah.
And let's work from there. And wherever you're at with that, bring that to that space. And when they offer up things, to love on them and say that that was beautiful, brave work. And we mean it. It's not, oh, it's beautiful, but seen it. That's not really Juliet for me. That's what we mean by that's shaming. That's wonderful. That you were clearly going to say more about it.
No, that was no. I mean, that's it. It's actually love. The tool is actually love.
Yes,
and people
but that's
say,
hard. For someone who's battled self-loathing up until 8 years ago, where I made a committed practice for self-compassion, that's really hard, right? It's one thing to say, "Oh, our rooms with love." We've been in a lot of rooms where people are like, "No, it's based on love." What the hell are you doing?
Right.
That's crap. And what is that woo-woo crap you're doing right now, right? So I get so impassioned about it, but yeah. So DE-CRUIT, it's an ever evolving, living, breathing process that is for the living, breathing people in the room. So it has evolved. It will continue to evolve. It's more about an ideal process, our ideal process.
And it's collaboration. And and I think it's so interesting that people when they hear pieces of it and they're not in the room experiencing it, they say, well, they can't. How can that work? I mean, that will just never work. We'll never get it done. You won't get plays done and blah, 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 all of this stuff. But
we do.
It does. It does. And people do. So there is a way to actually make and create plays without harm. There really is.
Yes.
You can come see three
without
of them.
harm. Yeah. All three of these were built with that model in mind, and checking ourselves when one or several of us break that. And that's important too, is to take the time right then, instead of going out in the hallway and going, so I felt unsafe in that moment. And, oh, I'm sorry you felt unsafe. Let's go back to work, right? Let's do the work. That's what we normally hear. Right. But for us, it's whoa. Nothing else should be happening until everyone feels, for trauma survivors to say safe, is a lie. Until we feel secure enough that we've addressed the harm that may have happened, whether it's transgenerational trauma, whether it was something said in the room out of ignorance, or whatever it was, let's address it and build on that. Let's make that our foundation on which the scaffolding of this particular process is built. And
you actually work faster when people feel secure.
Yes.
It sounds slower, and what people say is like, I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't have time for blah, 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 blah. And theater is therapeutic, but it's not therapy. But but it is. That's a lie.
We're the original therapists.
Exactly.
Our
Therapy
actors
came from theater,
yes,
not the other way around.
Psychiatry and psychology came from our craft, from our process, from our origins of theater. So you don't need, anyway, I could go on.
Time.
Do you have more?
Have time.
I know.
We take time.
You do have time.
Yeah,
take up time and space. That's something we're always saying. What advice would you give the arts organizations that want to reach veterans?
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's so good. Because I sit, I am the co-chair of the idea committee for the Shakespeare Theater Association. And before that, I sat on the education committee. And we had this huge discussion about engagement, because the way that outreach usually works, or traditionally has worked in the majority of theaters, is that their outreach is they just offer free. They just offer free tickets. Like, you get here, you come to us, and we'll give you the show free, which is not shaming that practice. Want to add to that practice of where are you? So start with the community that you're in, the actual physical space of where you're at and what's there. So many times their audience drives in from somewhere else, and they're not even dealing with who's on their square block. And the other thing is you must go to them, not the other way around. And people ask how we built DE-CRUIT. They act like there's some magical pot of veterans that we can give them access to.
We go to the other people's events.
We went to every New York City, all 5 boroughs, every veteran event that we could possibly go to, every organization that we could. We went there. What are you doing? What's going on in your community? What do you need?
Yeah.
What do you consider help? It's that's what I would advise. Yeah. I would advise actually speaking to veterans and not thinking what's best for them, or what they need, or what they would like. Maybe just have a conversation with maybe more than one, and take the time to go to a few veteran events and meet and talk and speak and introduce yourself, and learn to hone your offerings to what is actually needed. And if you have offerings and no one's coming, then really do the research to understand why is nobody, what can I do? Not, well, I did this and nobody came. That's
And you're only reaching, I would say a third or less are visible veterans, right? The VSOs, the veteran service organizations, less than a third of us attend that. Less than a third of us wear the veteran hats and shirts and all of that. And they're wonderful. So you're able, and license plates, even though we just did. Yep. But that's what I do. We go up and introduce individual, one at a time, go to the organizations, their functions, and support them and be a part of it. And like you said, in humility, ask, what do you need? I have this organization. What can we?
Here's my resource.
And DE-CRUIT was framed after that, of like seeing where are the holes, like what are points of inaccessibility, and where can we offer some points of accessibility instead of going in. I want to give that good metaphor. Is there was a TED talk. I should learn the guy's name, but he's Italian, and he talked about how in Italy they could either do in his day. They could either do military service or national service. And part of their national service is the equivalent of what we in the States call the Peace Corps. So he chose that national service, and they sent him to a country, I forget which country in Africa, and in what area specifically. And being Italian, he saw a riverbed and he thought, well, that's a perfect place to grow tomatoes. This is how he tells the story. So he said, come on, I'm going to show you all I'm going to teach you all how to grow tomatoes. And so they grew tomatoes, these big, lush, gorgeous crops of tomatoes. And when they were perfectly ripe, all these hippopotamus came out of the river and ate them all right down to the
Yeah.
ground. And of course, and as he describes it, he was screaming, losing his mind, going, "Why didn't you tell me? Stop them, stop them, stop them." And then when he asked, when they were hippopotamus were full and devastated it all and left, he asked, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And they said, "Well, you never asked. We thought you were growing the tomatoes to feed the hippopotamus, the hippos."
Mhm.
So it's I think a great conceit or great metaphor for the humility within which we can go to any particular group. Instead of saying, "I want to help you, I want to fix you," it's let me come just attend, let me support, let me be present, and then perhaps ask, "Oh, what I have this, maybe we can begin to work together." It's a long, slow, laborious process that too many organizations aren't willing to spend that amount of time and energy on. But that's it. You asked. That's it.
Exactly.
That's the process.
Do the
TDF is
work.
doing it, though.
TDF does
TDF
it.
is doing it with that program. All right. Last question. Like TDF, you believe in the transformative power of theater. Tell us about a show that changed the trajectory of your life.
Ooh la la.
first
Oh,
or
that's
second?
easy. I'll go.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I was in Los Angeles 2006-ish. And I was I had just done a show for this company called Will and Company, run by Colin Cox and Fran De Leon. It was Mackers. I met this dude, had a really great time with him, and they asked if we would do this other show and called Pebble in My Shoe. And that show was a show about Bishop John Shelby Spong, who was just a really beautiful man and a prolific biblical scholar. And he lectured around the country and wrote many books. He grew up in the segregated South, but he was one of the first to ordain women and to welcome Blacks and in his day, as he says, homosexuals into the church. So that made him very loved and very despised all at the same time. So he has this show about his life called A Pebble in My Shoe. And Stephan played the bishop, and there were two other actors. And we played all the other characters in his life as he told the story. So I had about 47 characters that I popped out, and we went on the road around the country where he spoke, and we performed this piece in theaters and in churches, turns out, and along the way, I really got to know Stephan, and changed my entire life and the trajectory of my life and how I moved in the business and what I thought was important and the people that I saw and spoke to. And we were married 2 years later in 2008.
Yeah. And he's the one that gave us the phrase, "Be willing to be the uncomfortable presence in the room."
And he had that great
stand
saying.
up.
And he had that great saying about audacity. Remember, he said, "Don't be audacious and then
and expect to be able to disappear." Or
then fold in your audacity or something like that. I can't remember what he said.
I remember that.
He had a beautiful.
That's lovely. I didn't know you were going to say that.
True.
And
life changing.
Yeah, I've already mentioned it, but Richard III that I saw when I was in mental crisis, I guess, in the Army. So that absolutely changed. I left the Army and went to graduate school for acting. But I also, I guess I'll throw out this one just because to inspire. We're always trying to, or at least I was trying to reach out to people, our fellow artists whom the world might otherwise be trying to crush out of their artistry. And when we work in prisons, that's who we see. you know, when I'm working with the men, I see fellow artists that the world just, you know, is trying to crush the artistry out, but it's somehow they've maintained it and have it and need an opportunity to blossom. So I'm going to throw this one out, that wasn't a play. It was an advertisement for a play in my hometown in La Crosse, Wisconsin, in the, I guess, 70s. It was when Evita was doing the national tour, and we didn't go to theater, or any of it. But I didn't know what it was. But the commercial was on, and they ran it, and it was, you know, it was the 70s, so they'd run a big hunk for the whole.
Oh, yeah.
Don't cry for me,
Patti
Argentina, and she would do, Patty would sing the whole, and they would put that whole bit up there. It was less of the bye now and Sunday only. It was a big part of it. And I remember it, and I memorized it and would do it and run around doing it. And my sister, thank goodness for her, Lisa, was the only one. Everyone else like, shut up, that's for you know what. But Lisa like, do it again, do Evita, do Evita. And it changed. It absolutely changed me, because there was one person who was feeding my love for the theater arts, for theater, for the artistry of others. And so, yeah, I would say that was it wasn't a whole play, but it changed the trajectory and the possibilities in my life. The idea of the possibility, or rather the possibility of the idea. Either way, it works. Anyways, that's.
I have one like that, Sidney Poitier, Raisin in the Sun. Oh my goodness! I was like, what's happening right now?
To see yourself on stage. Yeah. There you are. Thank you. Thank you, TDF. Thank you, TDF Veterans Going to Theater program.